Useful weather information depends upon the generation of accurate forecasts and their timely distribution. It is then the responsibility of the person on the ground to take the time to listen to and have the knowledge and skills to comprehend the information. This information, along with personal observations and local knowledge, can then be applied. So how do you interpret the information in a fire weather forecast? How is it different when you read it versus listening to it over the radio? And how do you give it or receive it in a briefing? Rick Ochoa works for Predicted Services at the National Interagency Fire Center. He has written many fire weather forecasts. We hope he can help you interpret the content of the forecasts you see, hear, and deliver every day.
The main components of a fire weather forecast are first the headlines. The headlines could be a red flag warning, a fire weather watch, something real critical for the firefighters. And if I can explain what a red flag warning is, a red flag warning is a combination of critical fire weather such as winds, dry lightning, in combination with dry fuels. These warnings and watches are provided for firefighter safety. A warning, a red flag warning, means those conditions are either occurring or imminent. A fire weather watch means that those conditions may occur in the near future, in the next 12 to 48 hours. The good warning or good watch has both a geographic location, such as the Boise National Forest, in addition to the particular fire weather zone number. The weather discussion will talk about the synoptic features such as cold fronts, high pressure ridges, low pressure troughs, and so on, that's producing the weather. A lot of times these forecasts are very detailed and very long, and it's important for the listener to try and pull out what are the important things, like cold fronts are very important, any kind of wind shifts, thunderstorms, turning hotter, turning drier, and things like that. So you should really be listening for those weather features that are really going to affect the conditions on your fire. The first element in a fire weather forecast is the sky weather, and that'll be the sky condition, whether it's cloudy or clear or partly cloudy, and the weather element like thunderstorms, rain, showers, fog, things like that. So pay particular attention to those things that are critical, such as thunderstorms. The next element is temperature, and they'll give you a range of temperatures for your particular fire weather area, and they'll oftentimes give you a trend, whether it's going to be 5 degrees warmer, 5 degrees cooler, and so on. The next one is humidity. They'll give you, again, a range of humidity values along with a trend. And after that is the wind. With the winds, you'll get a variety. You'll get slope valley winds, ridge top winds, 20-foot winds, and 20-foot winds are those winds 20 feet above the effective vegetation. So if you're dealing with an area with just grass, that's going to be 20 feet. If you're dealing in timber, it's 20 feet above the average tops of those trees there. Obviously, if you're on a ridge top, you want to listen for those winds. If you're down in the valley, pay particular attention to those slope and valley winds. The Haynes Index is an index that combines stability and moisture, and the values range from 2 to 6, 6 being high. And so this index does not include things like wind or other factors like that. It's strictly a moisture and stability of that atmosphere close to the ground. So again, what I'd be listening for there is if there's a Haynes of 5 or 6, moderate or high, those are the times I'd be really concerned about. If it's a 2, 3, or 4, typically those are the lower ranges, and typically there's not going to be an issue with stability or moisture. LAL's lightning activity level talk about the number of lightning strikes you're going to have over a given area. They range from 1, which is no thunderstorms, to a 6, which is numerous thunderstorms, typically dry. So again, I'd be listening for, values like 3, 4, 5, 6. Those are the ones that are going to contain more thunderstorms. In addition to the thunderstorms, listen very closely as to whether they're going to be wet thunderstorms, dry thunderstorms, or a mixture. The mixing height basically tells the firefighter that lower atmosphere, what is the depth of that atmosphere that's going to be well mixed? Typically in the afternoons it'll be quite high. It could be several thousand feet. And at night, typically those mixing levels come down quite a bit. They might just be a few hundred feet. That's important because the higher the mixing height, the greater the instability. And so with that, you're going to probably see more fire activity, fire behavior with the greater mixing heights. Transport winds are important because you want to know where that smoke's going to be going. So that'll the averaged winds within that mixed layer as to whether they're going to be coming out of the south or north, and they'll give you a wind speed there. So if you have high mixing heights and high transport winds, you're going to have pretty good smoke dispersion. Low mixing height and low winds are typically going to be smoke problems. The extended forecast, there what I'd be looking for is anything out of the ordinary. Are there going to be thunderstorms? Are there going to be strong winds? Get an idea about whether it's going to be turning warmer or drier. So a lot of times the most interesting, the most significant weather is going to be occurring in the extended period. So pay close attention to that.
Fire weather forecasts are full of useful information and are readily available throughout the fire season. Staying informed on fire weather conditions and forecasts is a pretty basic concept. But really, how easy is it? You and your crew are bombarded with information and indicators regarding your current fire environment. I mean, you definitely need to know what your fire is doing at all times, but awareness alone is just the beginning. Your ability to focus on what is important and filter what is not will allow you to interpret and convert it into something useful. Scott Dorval is a news meteorologist in Boise, Idaho. He will talk to you about some of the most basic elements of sky watching and the importance of simply raising your eyes to the sky and making frequent, thoughtful observations.
When it's 100 degrees in the summertime, what's causing the air to rise is the sun comes up in the morning, it heats the ground. The sun does not heat the air, the sun heats the ground, it heats solid objects. And the solid objects are touching the air, the ground is touching the air, and that air then gets warm, like a radiator, warms that air, and then that layer of air rises. And then cool air comes down to replace it, and that air warms up and it rises. And that's the mixing that occurs during the day that we talked about. When you talk about in fire weather forecast mixing, the air is mixing and then it continues to rise. Rising air will then cool as the air pressure drops. There's no air at the top of the atmosphere, so we know as the air rises, the pressure's dropping, and so the temperature drops. And in the clouds, the air cools, and when it cools far enough, it hits its dew point, and then a cloud forms. If you have more moisture near the ground, you only have to take that air and bring it up a shorter distance and you'll get a cloud forming. If it's extremely dry, the temperature and dew point are very, very far apart. The humidity is very low, and so you take this air and you have to make it rise higher and higher and higher. As that temperature falls, it has to fall further and further, and you have to make the air go higher and higher before you can get a cloud to form. And the reason storms will form over the mountains first is because it's an elevated heat source. The sun is heating the ground in a place where it's cooler and the ambient air next to it, and so it doesn't take the air to, it doesn't have to rise as far to get a cloud to form. That's why clouds will form right over the mountains earlier in the day, as opposed to waiting for the sun to mix that air all the way up to this point where it can mix it up right on this mountainside nearby. So this particular picture here is a very unstable afternoon. You can already see the rain falling as we're looking north into the mountains. Obviously we're seeing a very dark cloud here. You can see the lifting condensation level, that flat bottom to the cloud, and you're going to see the rain starting in the right-hand side of the picture there at about 4:20. You'll see the cloud start to ripple and that moisture just come ringing right out of the cloud, out of the thunderstorm. We'll see it right here on the right. And with that, you get a big burst of wind, which knocked my camera over, which is a good indicator that that was a pretty strong storm system. Okay, now this is another indicator showing the sun is now heating the ground, and you have vertical development of the clouds. You can see the puffy nature to the clouds. The sun heats the ground, the clouds, the warm air rises, makes those clouds. Now the sun is going down, the heat source is disappearing. As the heat source disappears, the clouds just disappear, because the only thing that's causing that moisture to condense is the lifting of the air, and the lifting of the air has disappeared. So we might have had a fire weather forecast that said that nothing's going to happen maybe today or tomorrow, but maybe we've got some indications that we're going to start bringing more moisture in. And then one morning you wake up and you start to see these low clouds. They're not real big and puffy, but they have a puffy nature to them, but that's smaller, and there's little clusters of puffy clouds. And what you're seeing here is altocumulus castellatus, or ACUS. that's a sign that, okay, we've got an unstable day here. This is a day that I really need to be paying attention in the afternoon and watching for the vertical development of storms. May not occur right over us. We may have one coming in, but that's a sign the atmosphere is ready. It's got enough moisture and it's unstable that it could be ready to fire in the afternoon. One of the things that's most important, obviously wind is a huge deal with fire. The wind is pretty much everything, and how is the weather going to impact the wind and hit the fire behavior. This particular loop was from a few years ago, but it really shows virga. Now virga is when rain falls from a cloud and doesn't reach the ground. This particular one, you can see some drops reaching our camera, but this is a good indicator showing what virga looks like. And it basically looks like the cloud it doesn't have a flat bottom anymore. You can see the rain hanging out of the cloud. It looks like the cloud is being stretched down to the ground. That is so vital because around these locations you can get very gusty winds. What's happening is the air is being cooled by that rain that's falling. That rain's not reaching the ground, it's evaporating because the air is so dry, and so that evaporating air then cools, and that cool rush of air comes rushing down to the ground, then can shoot out in all directions. Pretty much every thunderstorm is going to get some type of outflow boundary in the summer. They may be weak, they may dissipate, some of them will hold together with 40-mile-an-hour winds for over 100 miles. Typically, if you're out near a fire, a burned area, or in the open desert, there's going to be a very large dust cloud, and you'll see it right along the ground. The sky will be darkening just above the ground, and that's another thing to look for. And if you see that, there's wind coming very, very soon, within minutes. Let's talk a little bit about cold fronts approaching. This particular that we're going to see, this particular cold front happened in the winter time, but watch how everything's coming toward us. We're looking towards the south, and so clouds and weather coming toward us, but in the distance you can see the lower level clouds beginning to develop, lots more moisture, and watch this rapid shift of the wind and that flag showing up in the Oahe Plaza there, shifting directions, and obviously now we have a strong westerly wind. This is in quick motion, but when you are watching this in the field, when you see clouds that are coming towards you and they start to shift directions, then you know you've got a sign of a potential cold front coming through. In the summertime, it's either going to be so dry that you're not going to have any indication that a cold front's coming through, and you're just going to get a wind shift, and that can be very dangerous because you have no indication at all. From a clear blue sky, you get a wind shift, and usually from the north and west. Sometimes you'll get thunderstorms forming on the edge of a cold front, and obviously that's a little bit more indication you know something's coming. If you hear a forecast of a cold front that's supposed to come through during the afternoon, chances are it's going to come through. It's just a matter of when it's going to happen, and you really need to be aware of that. The sky could stay completely blue. If it's dry and it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you don't see any little puffy cumulus clouds developing on the ridge tops, that means it's so dry you're probably not going to get any cloud cover whatsoever. Well, that front could come through and just with a wind shift and a wind picking up. So when I walk outside, I'm always looking up. Sometimes I'll go to the beach and people are laying out in the sun, and then a cloud will move in front of the sun, and they'll get up and they'll kind of look around like this, wondering where the sun is. They don't even look up. They don't even, people just do not observe the sky. Every day, go outside and just observe what's going on in the sky, and you'll just learn and learn and learn, because then you'll have, oh boy, we got this heavy rain. I noticed this morning we had such and such, and it'll just start to click. I can't stress enough that as you go out, you get your briefing. Anytime you get a chance to get more information, you want to keep doing it, because it just makes your forecast that much more accurate. Next day's forecast is this good, and then the next day's day 2 and day 3 and day 4 and day 5. It all drops off in time, and so what makes those drop off is that it's too far away. You want to get that very latest information and constantly be looking at the sky to see if you can get some information yourself.